Welcome back, Planner Fam. I'm back again. This time it's going to be really simple, short, and sweet. I just want to talk about my favorite thing, index cards. Now, everybody knows what index cards are, and I think we all have our personal relationships with them, whether we use them as flashcards to study or we just use them for recipes or just to have for note taking. But I wanted to highlight a few things that I felt are important to think about when we talk about our planning systems as a whole and why index cards are so important to just live our regular lives. Like, I am the index card queen, self-appointed. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about it, and so I won't keep this too long. Just want to keep it brief. But here's the thing. Talking about my index card system, I have a lot of systems working that work, but I always keep on hand a few different sizes, and I use these for work especially. Actually, using them for work is what got me into using them for my personal life, but they are so effective. I couldn't resist. So you got your 5x8 size here. I use these for like whether I'm taking notes, like longhand notes where I have to like detail things out, maybe just put a lot of information on a card. I use them a lot for visions when I'm like, oh, this is where I see myself with this project, or this is where I see myself in 2 years with this. I use these a lot. Also, I use them for jotting out like bullet journal spreads. If I'm like, oh, I think this would be a good bullet journal spread, I'll actually take a card, and these are actually pieces of paper, but they are the same size as a 5x8. I'll take a card and I'll jot out like what I think the spread should look like, if it's like a chart or something like that. Like, so these are good for those. And I mean, the best thing about index cards as a whole is that, first of all, they're really inexpensive. And secondly, you don't feel so bad if you chart something out or you say, this is what this should look like, and then you want to throw it away or you want to recycle it. Like, you don't have to feel so bad like you wasted a page in your favorite notebook, right? It's just like, it's just an index card. Get rid of it or put it somewhere and deal with it later. So that's what I love about that's one of the things I love about index cards. I keep these for, like I said, for like visions, long-term planning, longhand notes. These are 4x6 cards. I use these a lot for pertinent pieces of information, like if I'm studying something and I need like definitions or I need like quick notes, examples. Like I'll a lot of times this is probably my go-to size. And then also I use these for milestones. So if you think, okay, I'm planning out a long-term vision and I need to have several details. They might change. I might mess up and then just start over. I would think you want to use a 5x8, and then you're talking about milestones like, oh, I'm on my way to this vision. Here's phase 1. Here's phase 4. Here's phase 9, and however many phases you want to go up to. I normally use 3 phases, but I'll use these as milestone cards, and I'll say, here's what it'll look like. And a lot of times I do it from the back end. So I'll say, here's what it would look like when we're finishing out and we're crossing off all our final T's and dotting all our final I's. And if we were here at the last phase, at phase 3, then here's what we would look like at the midpoint. This would be done, that would be done, these things would be done. And then here's how we would start out based on the midpoint. So this is why I like to use this size as milestone cards, because it's just enough information. You don't want to use a large sheet of paper or a large card necessarily, because it's just a finite amount of information. You don't want to go over this amount of space. If you are using more space than this, then it's not a milestone, right? It's like, or it's different sections of a milestone, so you can break it out on different cards. These are the 3x5s. This is probably the most popular, most recognizable form of the index card. And this I use for like 1 or 2 tasks, details that I'm taking about things, just different notes, something that I need to like sort out. And I'll get into that in a second. But these are probably, I said that these are my go-to. These are probably my go-to for just reference material, but these are my go-to for day-to-day planning, working through situations, prioritizing. The 3x5 index card is the best thing since sliced bread. Okay, now let's really get into it. Here are a couple of the ways that I use index cards. And once you get to be as out of the box as me, you might develop your own index card system. I'll get into that in a little bit later, but I do have this bad boy right here, which kind of is like a filing system for my index cards and different projects that I'm working on. But I think that's probably best reserved for a later video, because that's something that you could set up yourself based on whatever your goals in life are, whatever your responsibilities are, whatever you think about, whatever you love in life. And so we'll go over that later, but for now we're just going to talk about the different ways to use index cards that are going to be beneficial to us, right? Pre-planning. How many of us have a planner that we don't know what to write in, and we don't want to mess up the pages with the first thing we think of, or we don't want to mess up the pages with something that might get done quicker, or we just don't know what to write? So many of us get these nice fancy planners. I think I have one right here that I'm gonna, yep, perfect. Here's a nice fancy planner. I actually use this in my Franken planner, so I think I can probably show this. Let's say you have a nice fancy planner and you, let me get to a spread that I haven't used yet. April. I know I haven't used anything in April, so we can switch to that. You have a nice fancy planner and you have this nice spread and you have these nice pages here, and maybe you want to use some washi tape. Maybe you want to use some stickers. Maybe you want to use some highlighters and markers and make it look all cohesive like you see online, but you have no idea how adding something to this beautiful spread will push you further into what you're planning to do. And you also don't want to make that many mistakes, and so you don't want to use your pen to just go ahead and start writing stuff in. A lot of us suffer from this. Some of us don't. But for those of us who do suffer from that sort of thing, we can use index cards. There's so many times where I'll just, like today, when I sat down and I just started writing out all the things that I needed to do today. And sometimes I'll add a category at the top. Sometimes I don't have time for that. It's just the thoughts are coming out. And I'm like, okay, here are all the things that I would like to do today. Some of them just have one thing at the top, and I don't really know what I'm going to write at the bottom, but I just start thinking of things, and I just start writing them out on cards. This is the same way you could plan for yourself to say, okay, here's what I want to get done by July, right? And here are the steps that it would take for me to do that. First, I have to do this, then I have to do that, right? It's like the pre-planning of life, or just different. Maybe you have a bunch of dates in your mind, people's birthdays, events, holidays, things that you know that you need to be prepared for. Maybe you just have a bunch of ideas that you would like to just think more about. So that's one of the reasons why pre-planning on index cards can be helpful, because once you can get all of your plans out on these cards, then you can put them in sequential order, and then you can figure out where they go on your spreads. So that's point number one. Point number two is focusing on the good. It has been said, I've heard, that our mind thinks through 70,000 thoughts a day. And that is a lot of thoughts. And I don't want to be sitting there thinking about my most negative thoughts. So sometimes I'll just write out the good things that I want to focus on, or the good things that I want to make happen. And those will be my index cards, right? So, and I'll have those mixed in with my to-dos, so that in every third or fourth thing that I get done and I'm archiving my index cards, I'll run across something that I need to focus on that's really good, something to look forward to, or a positive reinforcement, something like that. So it's also been said that the mental focus follows visual focus. So if that's true, which I do believe it is, once you focus on something that you wrote down, your mind goes there. And if you want to control the thoughts that you are having, you can do that by focusing visually and that starts with an index card. I always say this: index cards make ideas physical. It's the first physical manifestation of an idea. Let's say you want to build a car or a spaceship or a rocket or a house, right? Like, or a restaurant or a mall or a product of any sort. Getting your thoughts out are the first physical manifestation of those things. So if you want to build something and you don't have the materials and you don't have the access to the things that you need to build, you have access to index cards, and you could just start writing it out, drawing pictures, jotting out things, getting little bits of research, and you could collect them all with either a rubber band, right? Or you could build yourself a system, or you could have those little clips. I have a bunch of these little binder clips that I'll get from the office supply store, and when I have a project that I'm working on, I'll put all of those cards together, right? And I'll order them up, and then I'll put them in the clip. So it's good for focus. Having index cards, you can just focus on it. I put focus on the good, because who wants to focus on the bad? In fact, that's another way that I use them. I flip it. Whenever I can't focus on something that's positive, I'll put out the negative. I try not to write the negative down, but then I'll flip the idea. So let's say it's like, oh, this is bad because it's rainy. It's a rainy day, or whatever it is. Then I'll flip over and I'll say, but this is why it's good, and that's what I'm gonna focus on, right? And that's just an example. I actually love the rain, so that was not a true example, but when you can think of the bad, then you should be able to flip over to the other side and say, well, here's what's good about this, right? Or here's what good could come of it. So that's one way. The other way is to brain dump. I touched on this briefly earlier, but whenever you have a bunch of ideas in your mind, oh, I got to do this, oh, this is on my mind. This is 5 months out, but I got to just get it off my brain. Like, you can actually just put all your ideas out there, and then you can sit there and say, oh, I'm unloaded, right? And then you have all of the things that were on your mind in a nice little stack, and then you can do as you wish with these. You can either put them up on a cork board, or you can tape them to your wall, or you can stick them in a folder and remind yourself to go back and look at them later, or you can just have them in your top drawer. Nobody will ever see them unless, you want them to or whatever. But having that little stack of your brain dump is going to feel so good when you get that out of there. Plus, now all your thoughts and to-dos and tasks are organized on little cards that you can portably take anywhere. You can reorganize and all that stuff. So that's really good. Prioritize is the next one. So that goes right into what we were just talking about. Once you have all your thoughts or ideas or project steps on your little cards, then you can just put them out and say, oh, okay, so these are all the things. Okay, well, this goes first, and then this goes last. Oh, this doesn't even matter. Oh, okay, this goes first before that. And then you can say, oh, what's not here is this thought. You can add in, you can take out, you can put everything where it needs to be. And that's just a great way. I find this to be so super helpful when I'm overwhelmed, when I feel overwhelmed, especially like working. When you have a bunch of different tasks from a bunch of different projects, and you're like, wow, this is like 15 hours of work. There's no way I can get all of these things done today. What's the most important, right? It's best to just take that little 5 or 10 minutes, write everything out, categorize it, and say, you know what? This can get done today. It doesn't matter if this gets done as long as it gets done by Wednesday. This gets done today. This gets done today. Oh, this needs to be done. This needs to be done. And now you can have it all stacked out and put it in order. So when you have them on index cards, then you're creating some depth and some distance in between your thoughts and what's real. So the tasks and the work is what's real, but you're putting it on paper and you're able to move it around when it's on a card. Unlike a list. And now I love me a good list. Don't get me wrong. I am also the list lady. But what I notice is that, especially when there's like a lot happening, putting it on cards gives me more flexibility to, number one, put them in different orders, reorder them. Sometimes I'll make a card stack and then I'll just bang out a like maybe 5 cards, and then I'll go into a meeting, and next thing you know it's lunchtime and I'm like, I've added maybe 2 or 3 cards then were there before. So then I'm like, oh, let me reorganize, right? Some of those things have fallen off. Some of those things have now become lower priorities because other things came in. So I definitely love the prioritizing factor of the index card, and it takes it off of your mind. So now your mind can think. Affirmations. This kind of goes back into one of the ones I mentioned earlier, which was focus on the good. But this means something a little more detailed. I'll actually write out affirmations. So many things. If we think 70,000 thoughts per day, some of those have got to be negative, right? And some of those negative thoughts are not even true. They're just being thought by us and listened to and believed. And so we have to be able to, what do they say? An object in motion stays in motion until an outside factor or something like that, instrument, I don't know exactly, but it's like what the Newton's law or something. I don't know. I hope I'm saying that right. But it's like an outside force has to interject in order for the object not to stay in motion. So if you're having like sort of a negative situation or a negative day, what's going to be the thing that forces you out of that thinking, right? Sometimes it could be something that you pre-thought, something that you recognized and said, you know what? I don't believe that this is true. I'm not silly, or I'm not stupid, or I'm not whatever it is, fill in the blank that you want to say to yourself, that like, I'm smart, I'm powerful, I'm strong, I get hard things done, I'm a thinker, I'm a reader, I can figure anything out, I can learn anything, I can be anything, I can do anything, right? The only difference between me and this goal is information and time, right? Whatever you want to say to yourself, it's nice to go through and find those different cards and remind yourself, like, yeah, I am powerful. I am not at an effect of all the things happening around me, right? Like, I don't have to let that dictate my mood. So I like to do a little affirmation with my cards sometimes, and I'll just mix them right on in. There's no reason to keep those separate, because you really do want to come up on those affirmations, especially when they're combative of negative thoughts that you regularly think, because we know we all have them. You're regularly thinking these negative thoughts. Oh, I don't have enough time. Oh, I don't look at this. Oh, I look so fat. Oh, I'm so blah, blah, blah. Those things are probably not even true, and you have power over yourself and your thinking. And so when you come across an affirmation card, it is that outside force to come in and challenge that like poor thinking. So anyway, got on my soapbox with that one, but this is one of my favorites, as you can tell. Goals, another great one. So many times we get caught up in our day-to-day structure, activity, schedule, responsibilities, and we lose sight of our goals. And then several days, weeks, sometimes months later, we look up and we say, oh my gosh, it's May and I haven't started on this thing that I wanted to do. So I'm here to say, why not incorporate some of your goals? And you could put it in a system, and I do have a system for breaking down goals into visions and milestones, and then into tasks. But why not start with just listing out your goals? Listing out your goals on index cards. And then you can always have them with you. And you might keep them in their own separate binder clip or paper clip, or you might keep them, wherever you want to keep them. But the point is, you have them, and then you can flip through them. You can flip through them whenever you want and just say, oh yeah, these are my goals. These are my goals. Oh yeah, I forgot about this one. Oh, I'm going to do one thing on that today, right? Just like having a stack of goals on index cards. It's just not a bad idea, right? You might even just keep them in your desk drawer. You might be able to do this at work and say, these are my goals for this year for my career. And then you might start every day just picking up that stack and saying, okay, I'm just going to go through these for 5 minutes. I'm going to visualize, or I'm going to go through these while I'm on this call and the people are talking about things that don't really necessarily affect my work. And I'm just going to review my goals. It is a proven fact that the people who review their goals on a regular basis are more likely to reach their goals. So why not use index cards for that? Okay, we've got a couple more here. Prayers. Now, this is interesting because lots of us want to keep our prayers private, and we should, all right? Like, however you feel about it. If you feel like that, then you're right. I sometimes will write prayers in my bullet journal. Sometimes I actually have a book where I keep a lot of my prayers, but sometimes I don't have that book with me, and I just need to write something out to God, like just so that I can get it off my chest, and I don't necessarily have the luxury of like getting right down on my knees right then, or maybe I want to remember it and pray it later. This is really good for prayers that I like to pray all the time. And I like to pray often when I'm praying for someone else, or when I find a good prayer that has been spoken or said by someone else, and I'm like, oh, I need to pray that over myself, or I need to pray that over my family. Index cards are really good because then you just have a bank of prayers. What a valuable stack of cards, just a bank of prayers. And it's also fun to go back over and see how many of them have been answered. You will be shocked. You'll be shocked. I haven't really done such a great job of keeping them all together and organized, but it's nice to have a little stack of prayers that you can just kind of like filter through, and even Bible verses. I just thought of that. I mean, I do know some people do that online, but just to keep them with you and to review them. I actually do my Bible verses a different way, but now that I'm saying this, I might be, trying that out. So yeah, prayers is a good way to use index cards. And the very last one, okay, here I have to admit that in order to use them in this way, in order to use index cards in this way, you might want to invest some time into building a system. It doesn't take a lot of money. Index cards are pretty inexpensive. You could take an old shoebox or one of those plastic. I have one right here. I can show you one of these plastic containers that you could get in any like Container Store or Office Depot or what have you. But like I said, you could keep them in rubber bands. You could keep them on binder clips. When you start doing these things, though, you're gonna need a system probably that looks a little bit like the one I showed you earlier, where you have, this one in particular has like the days of the month and the months of the year, and then we have an A to Z with the projects in the back. If you have something like that, or if you could build something like that for yourself, which is pretty inexpensive, you don't have to get a box that big. You could use something that you already have around the house, like a tissue box, like an old tissue box or a shoe box. But they're also good for these things if you have a good system of keeping up. Reminders like doctor's appointments or picking things up from different stores, or things that you need to remember at 7:00 tomorrow, or notes on this thing that you're going to report out on. Like, you'll see where people do interviews and they have a stack of cards. We've seen it before on like the late night shows and things like that. So reminders, details. Sometimes I'm on a phone call and they're like, oh, remember to do this, fax it to this number. Fax? Who faxes anymore? Or do this thing, or here's the code, or things like this. Details are really good. Sometimes I'm on calls and people just give different pieces of information that I need to attribute to different projects, but they're not the same projects, right? So I could put it on one sheet of paper, but then I have to remember that it's for 4 different things, or I could just put everything that I need on the card for that particular project. So that's what I mean by details. Recurring tasks, I actually use it in that way with this box. If there's ever something, and I actually have another system. I don't know that it's handy enough for me to show you, but what happens is I have these large cards that I've hole punched into a disc system where I have just the different quadrants of the day and the different days of the week. So I know, oh, it's Sunday, these 4 things have to be done. Oh, it's Tuesday, these 5 things have to be done, right? Like, I have it like that based off of the pre-planning that I did for the year, and knowing that I had to put things in particular order in order to get them done. Because if I just have them out floating about, then they'll never get done. So I'm like, you know what, you can do this on Tuesday at 6:00, and you might not do it every Tuesday, but if you do it for a couple of them, then it's better than none. So I did develop a system for that. But you can build your own system, and that's the great thing about index cards in general. Is like there are no rules. You can just start immediately. You don't have to set anything up. I have a bit of structure that I use. I always like to put the date at the top, and I like to put due dates and allotted times, and sometimes I'll number them in the bottom corner. But you can build your own rules and make your own way of things working, and that's the beautiful thing about it. But that's all that I have to say right now on this first video about index cards. I have much more to delve into, and I hope you'll follow me and like and subscribe if you liked this video. You want to like this, and leave me a comment below on how you use index cards, or if you have any ideas about how you might be able to use them in the future. So yeah, I look forward to talking to you more in my next installment. Hope you have a great night. All right, bye-bye.